The house was quiet that Tuesday evening when I heard the front door open. My grandson Tyler walked in with a beautiful young woman on his arm, both of them glowing with that electric excitement young love brings. I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled, my heart swelling with joy. Finally, I thought. Finally, he's found someone. I welcomed her into my home with open arms, made her favorite tea, and thanked God for answering my prayers. But 3 weeks later, when I opened that bedroom door and saw what they'd been hiding, the stranger dropped to his knees right there on my carpet, begging for mercy. That's when I knew everything. Every smile, every hug, every word had been a calculated lie. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Martha Henderson. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in this house for 42 years. My husband Robert and I bought it with every penny we'd saved, back when this neighborhood was just starting to bloom. We raised dreams here, celebrated birthdays here, and said our final goodbye here when cancer took him 5 years ago. After Robert died, I thought my purpose had died with him. But then came Tyler. He was only 8 years old when the police knocked on my door that awful October night. His parents, my son Michael and his wife Jennifer, had been killed by a drunk driver on Interstate 40. In one moment, I went from being a grandmother who visited on weekends to being a mother all over again. I was 63 years old, planning my retirement, dreaming of traveling to places Robert and I had always talked about. Instead, I sold the travel fund, cashed in bonds, and poured every ounce of my energy into raising that broken little boy. I worked double shifts as a pediatric nurse, my back screaming by the end of each 12-hour day, just to afford his braces and his soccer uniforms. I sold my mother's pearl necklace, the one I'd promised to keep in the family, to pay for his college textbooks. I turned down a marriage proposal from a kind widower named Frank because I didn't want Tyler to feel replaced or confused. This house, my savings, my entire existence became about giving him the life his parents would have wanted. Everyone in our neighborhood knows me as the woman who bakes cookies for the mailman, who volunteers at church every Sunday, who never asks for help even when she needs it. I'm not rich, but what I have, I built with sacrifice and love. Tyler was supposed to be my legacy, my proof that even tragedy can be transformed into something beautiful. I never imagined he'd become my greatest betrayal. Before everything fell apart, my life had a beautiful rhythm to it, a simple, predictable rhythm that brought me peace after so many years of chaos and grief. Every morning at 6 o'clock, I'd wake up to the sound of birds in the oak tree outside my window, the same tree Robert planted when we first moved in. I'd make my bed with the quilt his mother made us as a wedding gift, run my fingers over the stitching, and whisper good morning to his photograph on the nightstand. By 6:30, I'd be in the garden with my coffee tending to the roses. Those roses were Robert's pride and joy. He'd planted 12 bushes, one for each year we tried to have children before Michael finally came. After Robert died, I thought they'd die too, but they kept blooming season after season, like they were determined to remind me that beautiful things can survive loss. I deadhead the spent flowers, pull weeds, and talk to Robert like he was still sitting in his favorite chair on the porch. I told him about Tyler, about my day, about the neighbors. Crazy, maybe, but it made the loneliness bearable. Tyler would stumble downstairs around 7:15, still half asleep, his dark hair sticking up in every direction just like his father's used to. I'd have breakfast ready. Scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, wheat toast, and fresh orange juice. He'd complain that I was spoiling him, that he was 24 years old and could make his own breakfast, but he never stopped coming to the table. We'd sit together on the back porch, watching the neighborhood wake up, and he'd tell me about his job at the tech startup downtown. He was doing something with software development that I never fully understood, but the way his eyes lit up when he talked about it made my heart swell with pride. On Saturdays, we had our tradition. We'd drive to the farmer's market on 5th Street, the one that's been there for 30 years. Tyler would push the cart, and I'd pick out fresh vegetables, homemade bread, and those peach preserves Mrs. Chen. Makes that taste like summer in a jar. He'd carry all my bags to the car, refusing to let me lift anything heavy. "Grandma, you carried me for 16 years, he'd say. Let me carry the groceries. We'd come home and cook together, his favorite recipe, his mother's lasagna. I'd tell him stories about his parents while we worked side by side in the kitchen, and sometimes I'd catch him wiping tears away when he thought I wasn't looking. The house was filled with memories. Photo albums lined the bookshelf in the living room. Tyler's first day of kindergarten, his high school graduation, every Christmas morning. I had a special savings account at First National Bank with $127,000 I'd been building for years, adding a little each month from my pension. That money was for Tyler's wedding someday, for his first house, for the grandchildren I dreamed of holding. My attorney, Mr. Peterson, had helped me set up everything perfectly. The house was paid off, titled in my name, with instructions in my will that everything would go to Tyler when I passed. Every document was organized in my filing cabinet, every decision made with him in mind. I trusted him with my whole heart. He was my purpose, my second chance at motherhood, my reason for living. I went to bed every night thanking God for letting me keep him safe, never imagining that the danger would come from him. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when Tyler came home with that look on his face. You know the look, the one young people get when they're bursting with news they can't wait to share. He was practically vibrating with excitement as he dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. "Grandma," he said, grabbing my hands and pulling me away from the stove where I was making pot roast, "I have someone I really want you to meet, someone special." My heart did a little flip. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Tyler had dated here and there over the years, but he'd never brought anyone home, never used the word special. I squeezed his hands and felt tears prick my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, when?" "Tomorrow night, I'll bring her for dinner. Her name is Sophia, and Grandma, I think you're really going to love her." That night, I barely slept. I planned the menu, cleaned the house top to bottom, and even bought fresh flowers for the dining room table. I wanted everything to be perfect for the woman who might become part of our family. When Sophia walked through my door the next evening, I understood immediately why Tyler was smitten. She was absolutely beautiful, with honey-colored hair and warm brown eyes. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a bouquet of sunflowers. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, her voice sweet and respectful, "Tyler has told me so much about you. Thank you for having me in your lovely home." Lovely. She called my home lovely. I melted right there in the doorway. Dinner started wonderfully. Sophia complimented my pot roast, laughed at my stories, and seemed genuinely interested in our family photos. But then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, something shifted. The questions started. "This is such a beautiful house, Mrs. Henderson," Sophia said, glancing around the dining room. "How long have you lived here?" 42 years, I said proudly. "My husband and I bought it in 1983. "Wow, that's amazing. So it must be completely paid off by now?" Her smile never wavered, but something about the way she asked made my stomach tighten. "Well, yes, we paid off the mortgage about 15 years ago." "That's so smart. And this neighborhood, the property values must have gone up tremendously. What would you say a house like this is worth now? Maybe $400,000? $500,000? Tyler jumped in, laughing a little too loudly. "Sophia works in property management, Grandma. She can't help herself. She evaluates every house she walks into." I forced a smile and changed the subject, but the question hung in the air like smoke. Why would she care what my house was worth? Later that evening, after dessert, I excused myself to get more coffee from the kitchen. As I approached the hallway, I heard their voices coming from Tyler's room. The door was cracked open just an inch. "So it's all in your name eventually?" Sophia's voice was lower now, missing that sweet tone from dinner. Tyler's response was muffled, but I caught the words, "When she passes, everything transfers." I stood frozen in the hallway, the coffee pot growing cold in my hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. What were they talking about? Why did it sound so calculated? I forced myself to move, to make noise with my footsteps. When I entered with the coffee, they were sitting innocently on Tyler's bed, looking at something on his laptop. Both smiled at me like nothing had happened. That night, lying in bed, I tried to convince myself I'd misunderstood. Sophia was lovely. Tyler was happy. I was just being a paranoid old woman who'd watched too many crime shows. Young couples talk about the future, about finances. It was perfectly normal. But sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, my dreams were troubled. I woke up the next morning feeling foolish. The sunlight streaming through my bedroom window seemed to wash away all the dark thoughts from the night before. What was wrong with me? I sat up in bed and looked at Robert's photograph, almost ashamed. "I'm being ridiculous," I whispered to him. "The girl asked a few questions about the house. So what?" Over my morning coffee in the garden, I gave myself a firm talking to. Sophia was polite, educated, and clearly made Tyler happy. The way he looked at her during dinner, I hadn't seen him smile like that in years. And yes, she'd asked about property values, but Tyler explained that. She works in real estate. Of course, she notices houses. That's like a doctor noticing when someone has a cough, or a teacher correcting grammar. It's just professional habit. The conversation I'd overheard, I probably heard it wrong. The hallway acoustics in this old house were terrible. Maybe they were talking about his career, about his inheritance from his parents' life insurance. Maybe I caught the tail end of a completely innocent conversation, and my paranoid brain filled in the sinister blanks. That Thursday, I went to my book club at Helen's house. We were discussing a mystery novel, ironically about family betrayal, and Helen noticed I was distracted. "Martha, honey, is everything all right? You seem a million miles away." I almost told her. The words were right there on my tongue, but then I imagined how it would sound. My grandson brought home a lovely girl, and I'm suspicious because she asked about my house. Helen would think I was losing my mind. Worse, she might tell the other ladies, and soon the whole neighborhood would be whispering that poor Martha Henderson was getting paranoid in her old age. "Everything's wonderful," I said, forcing my brightest smile. "Tyler has a girlfriend. I'm just adjusting to the idea of sharing him, you know?" Helen patted my hand knowingly. "Oh, I remember when my David brought home Susan. I was convinced she wasn't good enough for him. Turns out she's the best thing that ever happened to our family. Give it time. Martha. You'll see." See? Even Helen admitted she'd been suspicious of her daughter-in-law at first. This was normal. I was just struggling with the transition, afraid of losing Tyler to someone else. It was textbook grandmother anxiety, nothing more. I remembered my own experience. When Robert first brought me home to meet his mother, she'd been cold and distant. She'd asked pointed questions about my family's finances, about my job, about my intentions. It had hurt so much, made me feel unwelcome and judged. She and I didn't have a good relationship until years later, and I'd always regretted that lost time. I'd promised myself I'd never be that kind of mother-in-law or grandmother-in-law. So when Tyler called that weekend and asked if Sophia could stay over to save her the long commute from across town, I didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetheart. She's always welcome here. This is your home, and anyone you love is family." I heard the relief in his voice, the happiness. "Thanks, Grandma. You're the best. I knew you'd understand." After I hung up, I felt proud of myself. I was being mature, open-minded, supportive. I was giving them space to build their relationship without interference. I made up the guest room with fresh sheets and put flowers on the nightstand. But that night, as I was falling asleep, Sophia's question echoed in my mind one more time. "So it's all in your name eventually?" I pushed it away. I was being paranoid. Everything was fine. Everything had to be fine. 2 weeks passed, and I almost convinced myself that everything really was fine. Sophia stayed over most weekends, and she seemed to fit right into our little family. She helped with dishes, complimented my cooking, even joined me in the garden one Saturday morning. I was starting to feel guilty for ever doubting her. Then came that Wednesday afternoon that changed everything. I had a doctor's appointment for my annual checkup at 2 p.m., but Dr. Stevens was running ahead of schedule. I was done by 2:45 instead of the usual hour-long wait. I didn't think to call Tyler to let him know I'd be home early. Why would I? It was my house. I pulled into the driveway at 3:15, noticing both Tyler's car and Sophia's Honda in their usual spots. Good, I thought. I'd make them an early dinner, maybe that chicken parmesan Tyler loves. I grabbed my purse and walked up the front steps, my key already in hand. The moment I opened the door, something felt off. The house was too quiet. Not empty quiet, but purposefully quiet, like someone was trying not to make noise. Then I heard it. Low voices coming from down the hall, from my study. The room where I kept all my important papers, my filing cabinet, my personal documents, the room I'd specifically told them was off limits because it was my private space, the one place in the house that was just mine. My heart began to pound. I set my purse down silently and moved down the hallway, my nurse's shoes making no sound on the hardwood floor. The study door was cracked open about 3 inches. Through the gap, I could see movement. I looked through that crack and felt my entire world tilt. Sophia stood at my desk, my filing cabinet drawer pulled open, papers spread across the surface. She held her phone up, photographing each document methodically. Click. Move to the next paper. Click. My property deed. Click. My bank statements. Click. My will. And Tyler, my precious grandson, stood by the door like a sentry, watching the hallway, watching for me. How much longer? He whispered urgently. She could be home any minute. Just a few more, Sophia whispered back, her fingers flying through my files. I need the life insurance policy and the investment accounts. Marcus needs everything. Marcus? Who the hell was Marcus? I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, something, because Tyler's head snapped toward the hallway. I quickly stepped back, my hand over my mouth, my whole body shaking. Did you hear something? Tyler asked. You're paranoid, Sophia said. She's not due back for another hour. Just keep watch. I heard them shuffle papers, drawers closing. I backed away slowly, grabbed my purse, and slipped out the front door as quietly as I'd entered. I sat in my car in the driveway, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I waited 10 minutes, my heart hammering, before I arrived home again, this time making plenty of noise, calling out cheerfully, "I'm home!" By the time I walked down the hall, they were in the living room, sitting on the couch, Sophia's head on Tyler's shoulder, both of them looking at something on his laptop. Innocent. Casual. "Oh, Martha!" Sophia jumped up with that bright smile. "You're home early. We were just looking for the Wi-Fi password. Tyler said you wrote it down somewhere?" The lie came so smoothly from her lips, and Tyler just sat there, nodding, backing up her story with his silence. "It's on the router in the kitchen," I said, my voice somehow steady. "I'll show you." That night, after they went to bed, I crept back into my study. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I knew my space. I knew exactly how I left things. The papers in my filing cabinet were slightly out of order. The drawer wasn't closed the way I always closed it, pushed firmly until it clicked, and then I found it, lying on the floor behind the filing cabinet, as if it had been dropped and missed in their hurry, one of my bank statements, the one showing $127,000 in savings, the account I'd been building for years, for Tyler's future, for his wedding, for his children. My hands shook as I picked it up. There was a slight crease across the middle, as if someone had been holding it while photographing it. They weren't just asking questions anymore. They were gathering information, planning something. And my grandson, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, was helping them. I couldn't deny it anymore. This was real. I couldn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophia's hands on my documents, Tyler standing guard, their whispered conspiracy in my own home. At 2 a.m., I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions that had no answers. Then I heard it. Tyler's phone buzzing. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The sound was coming from the kitchen. He must have left it charging on the counter like he always did. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was wrong to invade his privacy. But something stronger than guilt pulled me out of bed. My hands moved almost independently as I walked down the dark hallway, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The phone screen glowed in the darkness. Message notifications from S covered the lock screen. My fingers trembled as I used Tyler's passcode, his father's birthday, the code he'd never changed, the one he'd given me in case of emergencies. This was an emergency. I opened the messages and felt my heart stop. Sophia. Once the house is transferred, we split 60-40 like we agreed. You get 60 since you're doing the heavy lifting. Tyler. She trusts me completely. Like, completely. This is almost too easy. Sophia. That's what makes you perfect for this. She'll sign anything you put in front of her. Tell Marcus we're on schedule. Tyler. I'll have her sign the transfer documents this week. I'm thinking Thursday. She has her book club, comes home tired. That's when she's most vulnerable. Sophia. Beautiful. Once we have power of attorney, we can move on the nursing home placement. I already have Shady Oaks lined up. They take anyone, no questions asked. Tyler. How long before we can flip the property? Sophia. Marcus says 90 days after transfer. We listed at $485K, should sell in 2 weeks max in this market. Your cut is $175K minimum. Not bad for a few months of pretending to care about an old lady's boring stories. Tyler. Lol, true. Sometimes I want to scream when she talks about my dad for the 100th time, but $10 keeps me smiling. Sophia. The old lady won't know what hit her. By the time she realizes, she'll be in a facility and will be on a beach in Cancun. I had to set the phone down. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. I backed away from the counter until I hit the wall, then slid down to the floor, sitting there in the dark kitchen of the home I'd lived in for 42 years. The boy I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for, the boy whose tears I wiped when he had nightmares about his dead parents. That boy just called me an old lady whose boring stories made him want to scream. He was planning to drug me, trick me, steal my home, and dump me in some nightmare facility called Shady Oaks, and he was laughing about it, laughing with emojis and jokes about my boring stories while planning to destroy my life. I scrolled back further, my vision blurred with tears I couldn't shed. The messages went back weeks, detailed plans, discussions of timelines, references to forged documents, talk of getting me declared incompetent, mentions of a doctor who would sign anything for the right price. Marcus needs the final medical evaluation by next week, one message read. Then we file for conservatorship. Judge Patterson owes me a favor. He'll fast-track it. They had a corrupt judge, a fake doctor, an attorney named Marcus coordinating everything. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a criminal conspiracy, planned and executed with cold precision. And I was the target, the mark, the old lady who trusted too much. I sat on that kitchen floor until dawn broke, Tyler's phone in my lap, unable to move, unable to cry, unable to process the complete annihilation of everything I thought I knew about my grandson. The boy I loved didn't exist. He never had. Or maybe he died somewhere along the way, and I'd been too blind to notice. When the sun finally rose, I carefully put Tyler's phone back exactly where he'd left it. I walked to my bedroom like a ghost. I didn't cry. The wound was too deep for tears. It was the kind of pain that goes beyond crying, beyond screaming, into a silent, hollow devastation that has no sound. I had raised a monster, and he was going to destroy me. I need to maintain the emotional weight while showing Martha's investigative side, building tension and revealing how deep this goes. She's starting to move from victim to investigator, gathering evidence while still reeling from the betrayal. I couldn't confront them. Not yet. Some instinct, maybe from my 30 years working in a psychiatric facility where I learned to read dangerous people, told me that showing my hand now would be fatal. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I became a spy in my own home. The next morning, I acted completely normal. I made breakfast, smiled at Tyler, asked Sophia about her day. And while they thought I was just the trusting old grandmother, I was watching, listening, gathering information. I started with Sophia. While they were both at work, I searched online for Sophia Martinez Property Management. Nothing came up under her company name, so I tried variations of her name with different search terms. That's when I found it. A news article from Ohio dated 3 years ago. Woman arrested for elder fraud scheme. The photo made my blood run cold. It was her. Same face, same smile, different hair color. The article said she'd convinced an 82-year-old man to sign over his property, then disappeared with $340,000. She'd served 18 months and been released on parole. I kept digging. Another article from Florida, 2 years before that. Real estate agent accused of targeting vulnerable seniors. Sophia Martinez again, though she'd used the name Sophie Martin. The case had been dismissed on a technicality, but the details were chilling. She'd befriended a widow, gained her trust, and systematically drained her bank accounts. My hands shook as I printed every article, every court record I could find. This wasn't Tyler's idea. He was a pawn. Sophia was a predator, and she'd chosen him specifically because of me. But it got worse. The next day, I followed Sophia. I told them I was going to visit my friend Helen, but instead, I parked 3 blocks away and waited for Sophia to leave for her supposed work meeting. She drove to a small coffee shop downtown, and I watched from my car as she met with a man in his 50s, expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of man who looks like he belongs in a courtroom. I crept closer, pretending to look at my phone, and positioned myself at a nearby table. Their voices carried. The Henderson property is worth $485,000 minimum, Sophia said, sliding a folder across the table. Documents are ready for signature Thursday. Power of attorney, property transfer, everything. The man, Marcus, it had to be Marcus, flipped through the papers. And the grandson is solid? He won't get cold feet? He's desperate for money and resentful. Perfect combination. He actually thinks he's getting 60%. Sophia laughed coldly. The idiot doesn't realize that once we have the transfer, he gets nothing. We'll frame him for the fraud if he makes noise. My heart stopped. They were planning to betray Tyler, too. Marcus nodded. Judge Patterson is ready to sign the conservatorship if she fights back. Dr. Reeves will testify she's incompetent. The nursing home will take her the same day. They don't ask questions as long as we pay cash up front. How many does this make? Sophia asked. Henderson will be number 7 this year. We've cleared $2.1 million so far. This operation is running beautifully. 7 victims. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even close to the first. I took photos with my phone, my hands barely steady enough to focus the camera. Then I researched Marcus Chen when I got home. Disbarred attorney, currently under investigation by the state bar, but still operating through loopholes and corrupt connections. That evening, I searched for the other victims. It took hours, but I found them. Newspaper articles buried in local sections. Elderly man moved to care facility after family dispute. Widow loses home and property transfer gone wrong. Senior citizen's assets transferred to relative. Family questions legitimacy. 3 of them were dead now, died in substandard facilities within months of losing their homes. The others were unreachable, lost in the system, their assets gone, their families torn apart. The pattern was identical every time. A young relative befriended by Sophia, a quick romance, sudden legal documents, transfer of property, then abandonment in a terrible care facility while they liquidated everything and disappeared. I wasn't just fighting for my home, I was fighting for my life. And if I didn't stop them, I'd be the 8th victim of an organized criminal operation that had perfected the art of destroying elderly people's lives. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in 16 years. I sat on the floor surrounded by photo albums, the weight of betrayal crushing my chest until I could barely breathe. I opened the first album with trembling hands. There was Tyler at 8 years old the day he came to live with me. His face was swollen from crying, his eyes hollow with grief. I remembered kneeling down to his level in this very house, wiping his tears and promising him, "I will never let anything bad happen to you. You're safe now. I've got you." What a foolish promise. I didn't keep him safe. I turned him into this. I flipped through the pages, each photograph a knife to my heart. His first day of 4th grade. I'd worked 16-hour shifts that week to afford his school supplies and new clothes. His 10th birthday party. I'd spent 3 days baking a cake shaped like a soccer ball because he loved soccer, and I couldn't afford to buy one from the bakery. His middle school graduation, I wore the same dress I'd worn to 5 events that year because every extra dollar went to his summer camp. There was a photo of us at his high school graduation. My face glowed with pride, my arm around his shoulders. He was holding his diploma, smiling at the camera. I remembered that day so clearly. I'd sold my mother's antique ring that week to pay for his cap and gown and graduation announcements. He never knew. I never told him. The tears came then, silent and devastating. They streamed down my face and dropped onto the plastic-covered pages, blurring the images of our life together. I picked up another album, Tyler's first day of college. I'd cashed in my retirement bonds to make his first tuition payment. Robert and I had saved those bonds for 30 years, dreaming of traveling to Ireland, to Italy, to all the places we'd promised each other we'd see someday. Instead, I handed them over to the bursar's office without hesitation. Tyler's education mattered more than my dreams. It always had. There was a photo of us at his college graduation, both of us crying happy tears. "I couldn't have done this without you, Grandma," he'd said that day. "Everything I am is because of you." I believed him. God help me, I'd believed every word. I stood up, my knees aching, and walked to my dresser. I picked up Robert's photograph, the one taken on our 30th anniversary, just 2 years before the cancer diagnosis. His kind eyes stared back at me, and I broke completely. "I failed," I whispered to him, my voice cracking. "Your son and Jennifer trusted me to protect their boy, and I turned him into a criminal. I raised someone who laughs about putting me in a nursing home. I loved him too much, gave him too much, and I created a monster who sees me as nothing but a bank account." I sank onto the bed, Robert's photo clutched to my chest. My whole body shook with sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal, a grief so profound it felt like dying. All those years, all those sacrifices, the overtime shifts that destroyed my back, the winters I wore the same threadbare coat so he could have new clothes, the vacations I never took, the retirement I never got to enjoy, the man I turned away because I didn't want Tyler to feel displaced. Every single choice I made for 16 years had been for him, and he repaid me by planning my destruction, by laughing about my boring stories, by counting the money he'd make from selling my home while I rotted in some hellhole facility. I looked around my bedroom, the room I'd shared with Robert for 38 years, the room where we'd whispered our dreams and held each other through nightmares. Soon, if Tyler and Sophia succeeded, strangers would sleep here. They'd paint over the soft blue Robert had chosen, they'd tear out the garden he planted, they'd erase every trace of our life, and I'd be warehoused somewhere, forgotten and alone, while my grandson spent my money on beaches and champagne. For the first time in my 68 years, Martha Henderson wanted to give up. I was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of hurting, tired of being strong. What was the point? I was one old woman against organized criminals with corrupt lawyers and judges in their pockets. I had no power, no resources, no chance. Maybe I should just let them take it all. Maybe I deserve this for being so blind, so stupid, so pathetically trusting. Maybe this was my punishment for failing as a grandmother, for not seeing what Tyler was becoming. I lay down on my bed, still clutching Robert's photo, and closed my eyes. The darkness felt welcoming. Giving up felt easier than fighting. I was 68 years old, and I was done. I don't know how long I lay there in the darkness. Hours, maybe. Long enough for the tears to dry on my face, long enough for the crushing weight of despair to settle into something else. Something harder. Dawn broke slowly, pale light creeping through my bedroom curtains. I watched it spread across the ceiling, chasing away the shadows, and something inside me shifted. A memory surfaced, Robert's voice strong and sure, from one of our last conversations before the cancer took him. "Martha Henderson doesn't quit," he'd said, his hand weak in mine but his eyes still fierce. "In 38 years, I never once saw you give up on anything. Don't you start now." I sat up slowly, my body aching from a sleepless night on top of the covers. I looked at his photograph in the morning light, and instead of defeat, I felt something I hadn't expected. Anger. No, not just anger. Rage. How dare they? How dare Tyler and that criminal woman think they could destroy me without consequence? How dare they laugh about my boring stories? Stories about his father, about the family that loved him, about the sacrifices made so he could have a life. How dare they plan to warehouse me in some nightmare facility while they spent money built on my broken back and shattered dreams? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Robert planted, the roses still blooming despite everything. Those roses survived his death. They survived harsh winters and brutal summers. They survived because they were strong, because their roots went deep. My roots went deep too. I thought about those other victims, 7 people this year alone. How many had been too frightened to fight back? How many had trusted their families right up until the moment they were betrayed? How many died alone in terrible places, confused and abandoned, while criminals profited from their pain? If I gave up now, I wouldn't be the last. Sophia and Marcus would find an 8th victim, a 9th, a 10th. They'd keep destroying lives because no one had the strength to stop them. But I had strength. More than they knew. I walked to my mirror and really looked at myself. Not the defeated woman from last night, but who I actually was. Martha Henderson, 68 years old, survivor of poverty, grief, and single parenthood. Retired pediatric nurse who'd worked for 30 years in a children's psychiatric facility. I dealt with manipulative teenagers. I documented abuse cases. I testified in court. I knew how predators operated. I understood documentation and evidence. These amateurs thought they could outsmart me because I was old. Because I baked cookies and tended roses. They mistook kindness for weakness. They mistook age for incompetence. That was their first mistake. I thought about Tyler, really thought about him, not the monster he was becoming, but the broken 8-year-old boy who'd lost everything. Somewhere inside him, that boy still existed. And the greatest gift I could give him now wasn't enabling his crimes. It was stopping him before he became irredeemable. Real love, I realized, sometimes means enforcing consequences. It means standing up even when it breaks your heart. It means fighting not just for yourself, but for the person they could still become. I returned to my desk and pulled out a fresh notebook. My hands, which had trembled with despair hours ago, were now steady with purpose. I clicked my pen and wrote at the top of the first page, evidence. Then I began to plan. I was a retired psychiatric nurse who'd spent 3 decades documenting complex cases, identifying patterns of manipulation, and protecting vulnerable children from predators. I'd worked with police, lawyers, and social workers. I'd testified in family court dozens of times. I knew how the system worked, and I knew how to build an unshakable case. Sophia and Marcus had experience destroying old people, but they'd never met an old person who refused to be destroyed. They thought this would be easy. They thought I'd be victim number 8. They were wrong. Martha Henderson doesn't quit, and she was about to teach them that wisdom, patience, and righteous fury make a far more dangerous combination than youth and greed ever could. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, I was going to win. The first call I made was to Mr. Peterson, my attorney of 15 years. But I was careful. I couldn't reveal everything, not yet. For all I knew, Marcus had already compromised him. "Richard," I said, when he answered, keeping my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about my estate planning. I've been thinking about making some changes." We met at his office that afternoon. I watched his face carefully as I asked seemingly innocent questions about property transfers, power of attorney documents, and asset protection. His responses were immediate and protective. "Martha, if anyone is pressuring you to sign anything, you need to tell me right now," he said, leaning forward with genuine concern. "There's been an increase in elder fraud cases, and I won't let that happen to you." Relief flooded through me. He wasn't part of this. I had one ally. "Richard, I need you to help me do something unusual," I said quietly, "and I need you to trust me without asking too many questions yet." Over the next 2 hours, we created an irrevocable trust. Every asset I owned, the house, my savings, my investment accounts, went into a trust with me as the lifetime beneficiary. Upon my death, everything would go to St. Jude Children's Hospital. Tyler's name appeared nowhere in the documents. This can't be changed without 3 independent attorneys reviewing and approving any modifications, Richard explained. "Even if someone gets power of attorney over you, they can't touch these assets." "Perfect," I said. "And Richard, don't file these documents yet. Keep them in your safe. I'll tell you when." He looked confused, but nodded. "You're scaring me, Martha." "Good. That means I'm doing this right." My next stop was Dr. Stevens' office. "I need a complete cognitive evaluation," I told her. "The most comprehensive one you offer, and I need it video recorded." Dr. Stevens looked concerned. "Martha, is something wrong? Has someone questioned your mental capacity?" "Not yet," I said, "but they're about to try. I need ironclad proof that I'm completely competent." The evaluation took 3 hours. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, psychiatric screening, neurological examination. I passed everything perfectly. Dr. Stevens documented that I had the cognitive function of someone 20 years younger, no signs of dementia, depression, or any condition that would impair my judgment. "I'm giving you copies of everything," she said. "Video, written reports, test scores. Martha, whatever you're facing, you're one of the sharpest patients I have." That evening, I did something that would have terrified me a week ago. I played right into their hands. "Tyler," I said at dinner, my voice carefully trembling, "I've been thinking. I'm getting older, and I worry about what happens if I get sick. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should sign some papers so you can help me if something happens." I watched his eyes light up, watched him exchange a quick glance with Sophia. "Grandma, that's really smart," he said, reaching for my hand. "We just want to protect you." Liar. "Maybe we could meet with a lawyer," I suggested. "Someone who can explain everything to me?" "Actually," Sophia said smoothly, "I know someone. His name is Marcus Chen. He specializes in elder care planning." "That sounds perfect," I said, smiling like the trusting old fool they thought I was. But that night, while they slept, I made another call. To the FBI field office. To Agent Rodriguez, who specialized in organized fraud. "I have something you're going to want to see," I told him. "A fraud ring targeting elderly victims, and I can give them to you on tape." The next day, Richard helped me get a legal recording device, the kind that would hold up in court, small enough to hide in my purse, powerful enough to capture every word. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. The confused grandmother asking innocent questions, and every time they answered, every time they revealed their plan, I recorded it. I photographed the forged documents they'd prepared in Tyler's room. I documented every meeting between Sophia and Marcus that I could follow them to. I copied the text messages from Tyler's phone when he left it unattended. And then I discovered their biggest mistake. The guest bedroom where Sophia stayed. They'd turned it into their operations center. Files on me. Files on other victims. Bank account numbers, property valuations, a whole criminal enterprise documented in my own home. I photographed everything, every single page. They thought they were hunting me. They didn't realize they'd walked into a trap set by someone who'd spent 30 years learning how predators think. The meeting with Marcus was set for Friday, 5 days away. I had 5 days to make sure that when they tried to destroy me, I'd destroy them instead. The 5 days before the meeting crawled by like a slow-motion nightmare. Every hour felt like an eternity, but I couldn't let my mask slip. Not even for a second. Tyler and Sophia were floating on air, barely able to contain their excitement. I caught them whispering and laughing in corners, celebrating a victory they thought was already won. On Tuesday night, I walked past Tyler's room and heard Sophia on the phone. "It's happening Friday. Have the facility ready for Monday intake. Yes, cash payment, like always." Monday. They plan to have me institutionalized by Monday, 3 days after stealing everything from me. I clutched my chest, steadying myself against the wall, but kept walking. The recording device in my pocket had captured every word. Wednesday evening, packages started arriving. I saw Tyler hide them in his closet. Expensive luggage, new clothes with the tags still on. He was already spending money he didn't have, so certain that by next week he'd be rich. "Are those new suitcases?" I asked innocently at dinner. "Oh, just something I picked up," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Thinking about taking a trip soon." "That sounds nice, dear. Anywhere special?" Sophia answered for him, her hand covering his. "We were thinking Cancun. To celebrate. Us." The lie came so easily. They'd celebrate stealing my life with mojitos on a beach. Thursday morning, I met secretly with Agent Rodriguez one final time. He reviewed all my evidence, recordings, photographs, documents. His face grew darker with each page. "Mrs. Henderson, this is one of the most comprehensive evidence packages I've seen from a civilian," he said. "You've documented a major fraud operation. We've been looking for Marcus Chen for 18 months. "Will it be enough?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "It's more than enough. We'll have a team in position tomorrow. The moment they attempt the fraud, we move in." He paused. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It's going to be traumatic. That's your grandson." "That's exactly why I have to," I said. "If I don't stop him now, he crosses a line he can never come back from." Thursday night was the longest night of my life. Tyler actually hugged me before bed. "Love you, Grandma," he said. "You're doing the right thing tomorrow. We're going to take such good care of you." Each word was a dagger. I hugged him back, feeling the little boy he used to be somewhere inside this stranger. "I love you too," I whispered, and I meant it. That's what made this so unbearably painful. I didn't sleep. I sat in my bedroom looking at photo albums one more time, remembering who we used to be, mourning what we'd never be again. At 5 a.m., I showered and dressed carefully. I chose a simple blue dress, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, dignified but vulnerable looking. I needed to look like the perfect victim right up until the moment I wasn't. I put the recording device in my purse. I made sure my phone was fully charged. I said goodbye to my house, to my garden, to the roses Robert planted, just in case something went wrong. At 8 a.m., Tyler knocked on my door. "Ready, Grandma. Big day today." "Ready," I said, taking a deep breath. We drove to Marcus Chen's office in silence. Sophia met us there, looking polished and professional in a gray suit. She hugged me like we were family. I hugged her back like I didn't know she was a convicted felon. Marcus's office was in a dingy strip mall between a nail salon and a vape shop, not the kind of place a legitimate attorney would work. Inside, 3 other people waited. A woman introduced as a patient advocate, a man claiming to be a financial consultant, and a notary who looked nervous and kept checking her phone. All part of the machine designed to chew up old people and spit out their assets. The papers were spread across Marcus's desk: property transfer documents, power of attorney, healthcare directives, everything designed to give them total control of my life. Marcus began his rehearsed speech, using complicated legal terms meant to confuse me. I played along, asking simple questions, looking overwhelmed. Tyler held my hand, the traitor wearing the mask of a devoted grandson. "Now, Mrs. Henderson," Marcus said, sliding the papers toward me, "if you'll just sign here, here, and here, we'll make sure you're protected." Protected? The word tasted like poison. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. This was it, the moment everything changed. I looked up at Tyler one last time, giving him a chance to stop this, praying he'd remember who I was, who we were. He smiled and nodded. "Go ahead, Grandma. It's okay." I lowered the pen toward the paper, and then I said the words I'd been waiting 5 days to say. "Actually, before I sign, I'd like to introduce some other people who should be here for this." The room froze. Every eye turned to me. "What?" Marcus said, his practiced smile faltering. I didn't answer. Instead, I looked toward the door and nodded. It burst open. FBI agent Rodriguez walked in first, badge held high, followed by 2 uniformed police officers and a woman in a sharp suit. I recognized as the state attorney general's investigator. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Sophia's face went white as sheet paper. The fake notary bolted for the back door, but an officer was already there, blocking her exit. Marcus half stood from his chair, then sat back down hard, his hands shaking. Tyler jumped to his feet, confusion written across his face. "Grandma, what's happening?" I opened my purse slowly, deliberately, and pulled out the small recording device. I set it on Marcus's desk with a solid click that echoed in the silent room. "I've been recording everything for 3 weeks," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Every conversation, every plan, every crime you discussed in my home, thinking I was just a stupid old woman who'd never catch on." You can't," Sophia stammered. "I can, and I did." I looked at Agent Rodriguez. "I believe you'll find recordings of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder exploitation, forgery, and discussions of at least 6 other victims." Agent Rodriguez nodded. "Sophia Martinez, Marcus Chen, you're under arrest." The officers moved forward with handcuffs. Sophia tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. "This is entrapment. She can't do this." "Actually," the Attorney General's investigator said coolly, "she can. Every recording was legally obtained. You plotted these crimes in her home, with her grandson. She had every right to document it." They cuffed Sophia first. She was screaming now, hurling obscenities. Marcus went quietly, his face gray, defeated. The others were rounded up, read their rights. But I wasn't finished. Tyler stood in the center of the chaos, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "Grandma, I don't understand. I was trying to help you." "Stop lying," I said, and my voice cracked for the first time. "I read every text message, Tyler, every joke about my boring stories, every plan to dump me in Shady Oaks while you celebrated in Cancun with my money." His face crumbled. For a moment, I saw the little boy again, caught in a lie he couldn't escape. "There's someone else who needs to be here," I said quietly. I walked to the back office door, the one I'd noticed earlier, the one I'd arranged with Agent Rodriguez. I opened it. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, in his early 50s, with Tyler's father's eyes and his mother's smile. He wore a detective's badge on his belt. Tyler's knees gave out. He literally dropped to the floor, his face draining of all color. "No," Tyler whispered. "No, you're dead. You died. Mom said you died." "Hello, Tyler," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your Uncle James, your mother's brother, and I'm very much alive." This was the moment from the hook, the moment Tyler had looked at a stranger and fallen to his knees in terror. But James Morrison wasn't a stranger. He was family. Tyler had been told was dead, now standing in that room as a witness to his shame. "I've been investigating Sophia Martinez's operation for 2 years," Detective Morrison said. "When your grandmother contacted the FBI last week, they connected her to me. I had no idea my own nephew was involved until I saw the evidence she'd collected." Tyler looked between us, comprehension dawning, horror spreading across his face. His grandmother hadn't just caught him. She'd orchestrated everything, found his uncle, built an unbreakable case, led him straight into a trap while he thought he was the hunter. You planned all of this?" Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. "Every single step," I said. "The confused act, the willingness to sign, all of it. I gave you every chance to stop, Tyler. Every single day I prayed you'd change your mind. But you didn't." Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. "Tyler Henderson, you have the right to remain silent." "Wait," I said, holding up my hand. I looked at the agent. "We had an agreement." Rodriguez nodded and turned to Tyler. "Your grandmother has declined to press charges against you personally. However, you will testify fully against Sophia Martinez and Marcus Chen. In exchange, the prosecutor is offering a suspended sentence with 5 years probation, full restitution, and 2,000 hours of community service." Tyler looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "Why would you do that? After everything?" I knelt down slowly, my old knees protesting, until I was at his level. I cupped his face like I used to when he was 8 years old. "Because I love you enough to save you from becoming irredeemable," I whispered. "You can hate me for this now, but maybe someday you'll understand." Then I stood up, took Detective Morrison's offered arm, and walked out of that office with my head held high, leaving Tyler kneeling on the floor, surrounded by the ruins of the life he'd tried to steal. The story broke on the local news that evening. "Major elder fraud ring dismantled," read the headline, with footage of Marcus Chen and Sophia Martinez being led out in handcuffs. My phone rang off the hook. Neighbors, friends from church, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all calling to make sure I was okay. Helen from book club came over with a casserole and tears in her eyes. "Martha, I had no idea. When I saw it on the news, How are you standing upright right now?" "1 foot in front of the other," I told her, same way I always have. But the truth was, I wasn't sure how I was standing either. Everything felt surreal, like I was moving through water, watching my life from a distance. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Sophia Martinez was charged with 7 counts of elder fraud across 4 states, conspiracy to commit theft, forgery, and a dozen other crimes. The evidence I'd collected, combined with Detective Morrison's 2-year investigation, created an airtight case. Her bail was denied. She'd be in prison for a long time. Marcus Chen faced federal charges: organized fraud, corruption, forgery, conspiracy. The corrupt judge and doctor who'd been working with them were also arrested. The whole operation collapsed like a house of cards, and I'd been the wind that knocked it down. The fake notary took a plea deal and testified against everyone. The patient advocate and financial consultant scattered like roaches when the lights came on. Agent Rodriguez told me they'd identified 11 total victims over the past 3 years, with losses exceeding $3 million. $3 million worth of stolen lives, stolen homes, stolen dignity, and I'd stopped it. But the part that kept me awake at night wasn't the criminals. It was Tyler. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Chen, no relation to Marcus, she'd made very clear, met with me privately to discuss Tyler's case. "Mrs. Henderson, I want you to understand what we're offering here. Your grandson participated in conspiracy to commit fraud. He scouted for the victim, you. He provided access to your home and documents. He was fully complicit. I could charge him with felony fraud, and he'd likely serve 3 to 5 years in prison." "But you're not going to," I said quietly. Not if you don't want me to. You're the victim. Your wishes carry significant weight. She leaned forward. But I need to know. Are you protecting him because you're still being manipulated, or because you genuinely believe this is the right thing? I thought about that for a long moment. I'm protecting him because he's 24 years old, and Sofia Martinez is a professional predator who targeted him specifically. She researched vulnerable young men with elderly relatives who had assets. She seduced him, manipulated him, and turned his resentment into a weapon. Yes, he's guilty. Yes, he made terrible choices. But if we destroy him completely now, he'll never have a chance to become the person he could still be. Linda studied me for a long moment. You're either the most forgiving person I've ever met or the wisest. Maybe both. I'm neither, I said. I'm just a grandmother who knows the difference between justice and revenge. So Tyler received a suspended sentence, 5 years of probation with strict terms. He had to testify fully and truthfully against Sophia and Marcus. He was required to pay restitution of $15,000, even though I told the court I didn't want his money. Linda overruled me. He needs consequences, she said firmly. I ended up donating every penny to the National Center on Elder Abuse. The most important part of his sentence was the 2,000 hours of community service. It had to be completed at nursing homes and assisted living facilities. You're going to see firsthand the vulnerability of the people you tried to exploit, the judge told him. You're going to understand exactly what you almost became. Tyler stood before the judge, broken and hollow-eyed, and accepted his sentence without a word. As for my assets, everything remained exactly where Mr. Peterson and I had placed it. The house, the savings, the investments, all protected in an irrevocable trust that no one could touch. The forged documents Marcus had prepared were evidence in a criminal trial, nothing more. My home was safe. My future was secure. But my family was shattered. Detective James Morrison became an unexpected source of comfort. He came by the house a few days after the arrests, standing awkwardly on my porch with a bouquet of grocery store flowers. I don't really know how to do this, he admitted. I haven't had family in a long time. Neither have I said. Come in, I'll make coffee. We sat in my kitchen and he told me about his sister, Tyler's mother Jennifer, how they'd had a falling out years before her death over something stupid and petty, how he'd regretted it every day since, how he'd thrown himself into police work to avoid dealing with the grief and guilt. When the FBI connected me to your case and I saw Tyler's name, I couldn't believe it, James said. My nephew, the little boy in all of Jennifer's Facebook photos. I'd watched him grow up from a distance, too ashamed to reach out, and he'd become part of the case I was investigating. He thought you were dead, I said. Jennifer told him that after the falling out. James's face crumpled. I know, I read the statements. She told him I died in the line of duty so he wouldn't ask questions. And I let her. I was so angry I just let my nephew think I was dead rather than swallow my pride and apologize. We were both broken people, grieving different versions of the same loss. Over the following weeks, James visited regularly. We'd sit in the garden, share stories about Jennifer and Michael, piece together the family history Tyler had never known. James wasn't trying to replace anyone. He was just trying to be present, to be family in whatever small way he could. I didn't let Tyler come home. That decision hurt more than anything else, but it was necessary. I changed the locks. I packed his belongings carefully and had them delivered to the small apartment James helped him find. I couldn't have him in my space. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I didn't cut him off completely. I couldn't. He was still the little boy I'd raised, somewhere under all the terrible choices. 3 weeks after the arrests, I sat down and wrote him a letter. My hand shook as I formed the words. Dear Tyler, I want you to understand why I did what I did, not because I expect you to forgive me, but because someday you might need to understand it. I loved you enough to stop you from becoming irredeemable. When I discovered your plan, I had 2 choices. let you destroy me and become a criminal who'd spend his life running and hiding, or stop you while you could still be saved. You're 24 years old. Your brain is still developing. You were targeted by a professional manipulator who found your weaknesses and exploited them. That doesn't excuse your choices, but it does mean you have a chance, one chance, to become someone different. I will not be your victim. I will not enable your destructive behavior by pretending it didn't happen, but I will not destroy you either. You can hate me for this. You probably do. But true love isn't always warm and comfortable. Sometimes it means enforcing consequences. Sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means breaking both our hearts to save your soul. The boy I raised, the one who cried in my arms after his parents died, who loved soccer and science fiction and my chocolate chip cookies, he's still in there somewhere. Find him, Tyler. Become him again. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted. You're on probation for 5 years. You have 2,000 hours to spend with elderly people in nursing homes. Use that time. See them as human beings, not as opportunities. Let them teach you what I failed to teach you, that every old person was once young, with dreams and heartbreaks and stories worth hearing. I won't be visiting. I won't be calling. I need distance to heal, and you need consequences to grow. But I'll be here, Tyler, when you're ready, truly ready, not just sorry you got caught. I'll be here. With a love that refuses to be convenient, Grandma Martha, I mailed the letter and cried for 2 hours straight. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence. 6 months of slowly rebuilding my life, learning to be alone again, finding peace in the garden and in the quiet of my home. Then one day, an envelope arrived. Tyler's handwriting on the front smudged like he'd handled it many times before mailing it. Inside was a single page, written in the careful script of someone choosing every word deliberately. Grandma, I'm working at Sunrise Assisted Living now for my community service. There's a man here named Robert. He reminds me of Grandpa. Same smile, same bad jokes. He tells me about his life, and I actually listen now. Really listen. He showed me pictures of his grandson yesterday. The grandson hasn't visited in 4 years. Too busy, he says. Robert cries about it sometimes when he thinks no one can hear. I'm starting to understand what I almost became, what I almost did to you. Not just stealing money, that's not even the worst part. The worst part is I was going to make you a Robert. Alone, abandoned, wondering what you did wrong. You did nothing wrong. I did everything wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm trying. I'm really trying to find that boy you talked about in your letter. I'm not there yet. But maybe someday. Tyler. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a start. A tiny seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, Tyler could still be saved. That afternoon, I went to the garden center and bought a new rose bush. I planted it in the far corner of the garden where Robert's original bushes had left a gap. This one was different, a variety called New Dawn, known for its resilience and ability to bloom even after harsh winters. I patted the soil around its roots and whispered a prayer to Robert. I did what you would have done, I told him. I fought back, and maybe, just maybe, I saved our grandson's soul. The rose bush would take time to establish its roots, time to grow strong enough to survive the winter, time to bloom just like Tyler, just like me. 6 months after planting that rose bush, I stand in my garden on a cool spring morning, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and amber. The New Dawn rose has survived its first winter. Small buds are beginning to form, tight and green, holding the promise of blooms to come. Not yet, but soon. I think about how close I came to losing everything. Not just the house or the money. Those are just things, replaceable in the grand scheme of life. I almost lost something far more precious. My dignity, my autonomy, my very sense of self. I almost became another invisible victim, warehoused and forgotten, my story ending in silence and shame while criminals profited from my pain. But I didn't let that happen. And standing here now, coffee cup warming my hands, roses blooming around me, I realized something profound. I didn't survive this because I was perfect. I survived because when it mattered most, when every instinct told me to give up, I chose to fight. The scar of Tyler's betrayal will never fully heal. There are nights I still wake up crying, mornings I see his childhood photos and feel that crushing weight of grief all over again. But I've learned something I wish I'd known earlier in life. Betrayal says everything about the betrayer and nothing about the worth of the betrayed. Tyler's choices were his own. I didn't deserve what he tried to do to me. No one does. I'm 79 years old now. Well, I'll be 69 next month. But some days I feel ancient. My back still aches from those double shifts decades ago. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be. But I'm still here, still standing, still tending Robert's roses and living in the home we built together. And I'm not alone. Detective James Morrison comes by every Sunday. We cook dinner together, share stories, slowly rebuild the family that trauma tried to destroy. He's teaching me about the sister I never really knew, and I'm teaching him about the nephew he thought he'd lost forever. As for Tyler, well, that story is still being written. Some chapters end, some remain unfinished. That's life. What I know now, what I wish I could tell every grandmother, every elderly person who trusts too much and questions too little, is this. You are not weak because you're old. You are not helpless because you're kind. Age brings wisdom, and wisdom, when combined with courage, is the most powerful weapon in the world. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Family isn't always found in DNA. Sometimes it's found in the people who stand beside you when your own blood tries to destroy you. Greed can corrupt anyone, turning love into transaction, family into opportunity, trust into a weapon. But here's what the villains never understand. We don't become weak when we age. We become dangerous. We've survived decades of heartbreak and loss. We've buried spouses, raised children, weathered storms that would break younger souls. We know things about resilience that youth hasn't learned yet. The people who tried to steal my life thought my kindness was stupidity. They thought my trust was weakness. They thought my age made me vulnerable. They were wrong about all of it. Betrayal often wears a familiar face. The people who can hurt us most deeply are the ones we love most completely, because betrayal requires access, and we only give access to those we trust. That's why it cuts so deep. That's why it feels like dying. But refusing to be a victim isn't about revenge. It's about survival. It's about standing up not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. If I'd let them win, Sophia and Marcus would have found victim number 8, number 9, number 10. They'd still be destroying lives, stealing dreams, warehousing grandmothers in terrible places, while spending money earned through their pain.